Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and the name of this show is Let's Live with Thurman Greco, and it's coming to you live from scenic downtown Woodstock in our educational channel studio on Channel 23. And it's also coming to you on YouTube. And this is the election season in Woodstock, and anybody that's gotten within 100 miles of Woodstock knows that elections are very, very important. We take our elections very seriously. And I try at every election season to have as much coverage as possible. And this evening, we have
Laura Ricci, current town council member.
Laura, where are you in the race? Are you halfway through? Are you 3/4 through? Are you 1/10 through?
Well, election day is November 7th. So I would say we're at least 3/4 of the way through because the race began in February. So here we are just a month away. It was February when Bill and Newell and I announced our candidacy, and we announced that we all believed that three of us together would be the best solution for Woodstock. And we have continued that belief every step of the way. We campaigned together for the primary. We were very successful. Thank you to the people of Woodstock, the Democrats of Woodstock. It was a Democrat primary. The Democrats came out and voted and did vote to put us on the Democrat line for the November 7th election. So I thank the people of Woodstock very much for putting us on the Democrat line. And I do ask for your vote. Everybody gets to vote in the general election. I ask for everybody's vote for the three of us. It's critical that we have three people who are going to fight for Woodstock, put Woodstock first. Bill and Newell and I are each leaders in our own right. We will not always begin agreeing with each other, but we will always put Woodstock first as we work out what's best for Woodstock. So I would say we're at least 3/4 of the way through because we began in February. Election day is 1 month from tomorrow, but early voting starts on October. Which I think I have the date right. It's a Saturday. Our early voting is 9 days, goes from a Saturday to a Sunday, and I believe that October 28th is day one of early voting, and so we're really, really close to that.
So you're getting short.
I've always been short.
How many elections have you run in?
Well, I've run. So this is my third election. I ran 8 years ago for my first term on the Woodstock as a town council member on the Woodstock Town Board, and I ran 4 years ago. So this is my third time running for Woodstock Town Board.
Yeah, but you've been doing other things for your community. What have you been doing?
Yes. Today or before I began on the town board?
Before you began on the town board.
So before I began on the town board in the town of Woodstock, what was really pivotal, and I think that you knew Jerry, my late husband.
Yes.
So Jerry passed in 2010, and when Jerry was alive, for probably 15 years, he was pretty active in Woodstock politics, and he was active. He was so active that the Woodstock Times, there was one time they were writing an article. Not only did they just include him in the article, but the reporter called our house and said, this is not going to be, my editor said this won't be a balanced article until you call Jerry Ricci and get an opinion. So Jerry was that involved, he was that involved in Woodstock politics. Not only was he often quoted, but sometimes he was called specifically for a quote. And when he was active in politics, it just didn't make sense for me to get active. One person in the family being active made sense. When he passed, I started to get active. He passed in February of 2010. And about 3 months later, Jeff Moran was the supervisor, and I bumped into him in the post office. He said, "How are you doing?" We'd known Jeff for years. And he said, "How are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm doing pretty well, but I'd really like to get involved in town things." And Jeff invited me into his office. He said, "Well, why don't you make an appointment, come into the office. I'll let you know what volunteer activities are available." And it was a shock to my system to lose Jerry. We'd been together for 30 years, and we were soulmates, and it was, it was a shock to my system. And when I went to visit Jeff Moran, the thing that looked most about what I was up for was the dog park committee of all things. And that's when I joined the dog park committee, and there was no dog park in Woodstock then. And Fran Breitkopf led it. We had a great committee. And so the first thing I volunteered on in town was the dog park committee. We located a place for the dog park. It, with the help of Woodstock Maintenance, it got created. With the help of the town board approving it, it got created. And the dog park continues today. So I volunteered on that. I volunteered on the planning board, which I loved. I learned about Woodstock zoning laws. We would have case studies. We would have case visits. We would do site visits to do the different cases we were on. The Woodstock Planning Board has 7 people, so when you join, you get partnered with somebody more experienced, which is a great way to learn. And I loved the planning board experience. I was also deputy supervisor after a while, so I did both things for a while. When I got on the town board, then I then could no longer be on the planning board as conflict of interest, so I went from the planning board to the town board. I've been on the Woodstock Democratic Committee probably for, at least a decade, and I spent about 4 years as chair. So I've also volunteered as on the Woodstock Democratic Committee to help the entire slate, and I'm doing that. I still do that today, helping the entire slate. When I go door to door, I'm not just talking about myself. I'm not just talking about Bill and Anula. I always talk about us because I want to make sure people know the value that I believe we'll bring. But I also talk about Don Allen has opposition, Manny Neji has opposition. I go through the people on the slate that don't have opposition, but I also go through those that do have opposition because I believe there are great reasons for people to vote for Manny and great reasons for people to vote for Don Allen. So that's kind of a volunteer thing I do, is I really volunteer my time for the whole slate, not just myself. And I also do things in my church, which is not really town related, but I do lead pastoral care for my church, and I also serve the altar with the priest. When she gives communion, she gives the bread and I give the wine usually on the days that I'm scheduled. So I am very involved in a lot of things, and they're meaningful to me, and I hope I'm making a difference in the areas that I've been doing things.
So you kept yourself busy.
Totally, and we have.
Hello Woodstock, Bill McKenna here. A quick public service announcement before we get rolling here on other topics. The water department had up by Pump House 2 a major pipe break. Ironically, we just signed a contract to repair the piping in Pump House 2, so it couldn't have come at a better time or a worse time. But we do have that pump house is offline at the moment and probably will be for several days to a week. The other pump house is doing very well. It's got the new well in it, so we're confident. But we do ask people in these situations just to be aware of your water consumption and just maybe shut that faucet off a minute quicker. So please just be aware of that. Thank you.
Can I ask you, you said pump house 2. How many pump houses do we have?
So Woodstock, the water district has 2 pump houses comprised of 7 wells altogether. We have 2 wells at Pump House 1, which is right behind the ball field at Rick Volt's. We actually, one of the wells used to be right in the building, and it has silted in so much and it's been repaired a few times, but it got to the point where they couldn't work inside the building anymore. So we actually, 2 years ago, we drilled a new well, and it takes a long time for this to come through. We finally just brought it online. We got the pump put in 2 weeks ago, and we finally just brought it online. So we're back to 2 wells there. And the other is behind, just before you cross the Yerry Hill Bridge into the right is the second pump house, and there are 5 wells there. And that's where we have the problem tonight. So I'd show you my boots. I got about 1.5 feet of water. I was down in the basement there, but hats off to the water department. They did a great job. The boss is actually away for a couple of days on vacation, well deserved, but I've been in contact with him, so hats off to him for interrupting his vacation. I'm sorry, Larry. But his 2 guys did great. And Kevin Hunter was the former water superintendent and lives right there. So Kevin was actually out and helping us, and thank you, Kevin Hunter.
So do we have areas where there is no water?
No, everybody has water. All the water is turned on. We've still got that first pump house We've got a 1,000,000-gallon water tank, which is filled to the brim. So we don't anticipate that there's a problem, but we just like to remind people just to
We're not running at 100%.
We're not at 100%, and just be a little wary for the next couple of days. It could take a week or more to get it fixed. It's not like you go down and buy a part at the hardware store and go to it. So
are you going to have to get a new unit, or are you going to be able to order parts, or do you know at this point?
So what broke was a pipe. There's down in the basement of the pump house, there's a manifold where the 5 pumps all come in, and then they join into 2 bigger pipes and then into 1 bigger pipe. And one of the medium-sized pipes cracked between the 2 wells. And it's going to be a tough, there's not a lot of room and tolerance, so it's going to be a little difficult to work in. But, and again, we are scheduled to have it all replumbed in a different manner, because this was always a concern that the way they had it plumbed up made it a little susceptible to problems like this. So so the decision will be, do we wait maybe an extra week or 2 and just do the new fix, or do we put a Band-Aid on it for a couple of weeks and limp along? I think it was scheduled for the end of November, early December.
You were that close.
Yes. Ironically, the gentleman who's going to do the work, he was down today. We were working, hooking up for a water line to the Como offices, and he came down to tap into the main line, and so we were all finished at about 10 o'clock, 10:30, and I shook his hand and said, "Thanks, Dan, for coming down. This is the next project." He's also the gentleman that put the new pump in the other well house. And I said, "So I guess we can probably wait. This is my mistake. Probably wait till November, December. You can come and do that next project." He said, "Yeah, that sounds great." And lo and behold, 8 hours later, I'm calling him back and saying, "Well, we might need to see you a little sooner."
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I want to say is I always appreciate Bill is always on top of things, because this is an example. People don't always know what all does a supervisor do, and even the supervisor doesn't always know when he starts his day what all he's going to do, because it wasn't until the issue happened. Yeah, as he said, he already had a long-term plan for it, but then all of a sudden there was a glitch today, and I always appreciate Bill's knowledge of so many things where he can jump in there and be so effective at getting a solution and figuring out how do we get through today, tomorrow, and what do we do long term. And this is one example of why I continue to support Bill in the role of supervisor, because of all the knowledge he brings. And he's able to explain things, and he's able to understand things, and he's able to fix things. So problem solving is, here's an example of problem solving.
That's a good point, Laura, because, any given day, 3 different problems
Can happen.
present themselves. And, it's not always a plumbing problem or something like that, which I'm, as a contractor, a little bit more comfortable with. But, it could be a personnel problem, or an insurance problem, or, an automobile accident.
Or we're doing the budget.
We're doing the budget. So it's, I never quite know what my day is going to look like. And, which I find interesting. I mean, I like to problem solve, so I enjoy it, but it is a skill that anyone who wants to be supervisor really needs to be able to utilize and have. So.
Well, I think that there are the different supervisors that we've had in the past. Each one has brought a different skill set
Absolutely.
into it. And I think your skill set as being hands-on and not afraid of plumbing and not afraid of carpentry and not afraid of these different things has helped us in a financial way, because you were able to troubleshoot pretty quickly.
Yes, thank you. I do feel that I'm able to contribute in that way. And you're right, every supervisor has different skills. I mean, God bless Jeremy. He was incredibly gifted writer. I was always just so impressed how he could whip out a letter in no time flat, and I struggle to. And
he could quote Shakespeare. He could he could do
exactly.
anything.
And he had certain budget skills. I think I'm pretty good at the budget, and I learned a lot from him, but he also had a good memory for numbers, and which I'm not quite as strong at. We were a great team, he and I, because we really, we balanced each other out well. And where I wasn't afraid, you know, he'd call me up and say, you know, can you go deal with this? I remember, actually, I just told this to Kevin Hunter. I remember one night, we had a town board meeting, and I got home and it was about 11 o'clock, and poor Kevin calls me up, and I think he didn't get through to Jeremy. The line was busy. And he calls me up, and he's stuttering, and he's saying something, and I said, Kevin, slow down, what are you saying? And what he was saying was the 1-million-gallon water tank was empty.
Okay.
And so this is another plumbing issue.
That's important.
I says, oh, okay, Kevin, well, hold on, I'll meet you out
A
there.
1,000,000 gallons lost.
Lost.
Wow.
So what had happened was somebody had a hydrant open in the evening, and they closed it a little too quick. And there's a thing called water hammering. So imagine that water is flowing, and all of a sudden you stop it. Well,
Yeah.
it hits that wall and it bounces back. And instead of just closing it very slowly and easing it, so somebody closed it real quick, and it caused water hammer, and it sent a shock back up the water line to the 1-million-gallon tank. And the line came in, and there was an elbow that went up into the bottom of the tank, and it pushed it there and cracked that.
Oh, dear.
And I don't think it took more than an hour or two, the whole thing was empty.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I remember going up there, and we looked in there, I said, yeah, it's empty.
Yeah, it's gone.
And we were fortunate that our town engineer, Bernier Larios, Dennis Larios, one of his key employees, Paul Van Wagenen, lived in town. So, you know, I called him at 11 o'clock. I says, Paul, can you meet me out there at 6 in the morning? He says, yeah, I'll see you out there. And we climbed in the tank, and we looked around. Sure enough, that elbow was broke. And
Wow.
we had it back online in a day or two. You know, everybody, that is the one great thing about Woodstock employees, is that we all pull together. And when there is a problem, everybody knows what has to be done, and it all just gets fixed. It is a little interesting because, you know, a lot of our senior people have retired over the last couple of years, so we've seen new guys coming, new folks coming, and, you know, some of them aren't quite as up to speed, so there's a little stutter, but it's a good crew, so I'm comfortable and confident that you know, with time, they'll gain that experience as well.
Well, but you just said something which I think is very important. And that is that you do have a crew that's been around. You do have people who come to work in your crew, and they stay through the years.
Yeah.
So that you bring them up and you develop their skills.
Yes.
That's something that not every community can boast.
No, if you think about, I mean, Kevin Hunter, who worked for the town for 30 some odd years, his sister Jackie Early, our town clerk, is closing in on 40 years. Clayton Heath, our chief, is closing in on 40 years. Scott Bonesteel, who retired as highway superintendent a month ago, 37 years, 38 years. So we've got a lot of longevity there.
Yes.
So.
And it's continuing through the younger ones.
We hope so. You know, it's interesting, and I know that it's not just Woodstock. I think it's a national problem. It's both private sector. There's more of a trend where people jump from
Yeah.
jobs to job, where they
A
may
lot
be,
of industries
yeah,
find that.
are experiencing that. So it's,
Yeah.
I think that's going to be one of the challenges moving forward, is figuring out how to keep people.
I think one of the main things that are going to help keep people, because Woodstock is obviously a good place to work,
Yeah.
is finding housing for the new ones that are coming
Oh,
out.
amen to that.
You know?
It's a big.
We're having a public hearing on the new housing law on the 17th of this month. So anybody that wants to weigh in on the new proposed housing law, Tuesday, October 17th, 7 p.m. Well, the public hearing probably doesn't start right at 7 p.m., but the meeting starts at 7 p.m. But we're trying to resolve that. We're trying to find ways.
Where is this meeting being held?
It's at the Cuomo, plus it's on Zoom. And if anybody goes on the town calendar, it's the town board meeting. Anybody who goes on the town calendar can pull the link for the Zoom, but it's in the Cuomo at 7 p.m. If you want to.
That is so essential. If a guy has got, or a woman, if some skilled person has 2 job offers and they can't find housing in one of those places, they're going to take the other job.
Yeah.
You know, and whether they wanted the other job first or not is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a crisis that we have to deal with.
Well, and the new housing law, and I've been part of the Housing Oversight Task Force, it's probably 2.5 years now that we've been going. And what the new housing law does is it does have things in there that will help encourage affordable housing, but also doing things in an environmentally sensitive way. So the main things, and I was liaison on the comprehensive plan and actively involved with the comprehensive plan as that was being built, and it was approved by the town board in 2018. But the 2 main messages of the comprehensive plan is keep the open space, keep Woodstock the way we like it with all the environment, but also let's get some more housing. Affordable housing is an issue. So I don't know how the new law could have done it better. There are people who I know have already spoken out, they don't like this or that about it, but where's the better solution to bring us affordable housing while we maintain the environment the way we like it? So it's going to be very important for people to if you haven't already read it, read it. The first draft was available a year and a half ago, and then the Housing Oversight Task Force, which I'm a part of, got comments. We spent about 10 months incorporating comments, put out another draft about 5 months ago, and now we've gotten comments there, and there's another draft that's now available. So it's been a long process with drafts available to the public for at least a year and a half, and keep on giving the feedback. But how
important is affordable housing? How
Totally.
realistic is that house that somebody needs? Is there a possibility it's going to go somewhere?
I do believe it is. And, I just want to reiterate what Laura said. When we adopted the comprehensive plan, the first new plan since 1964, before I was born, the number one issue, the number one concern for the public was affordable housing. They saw that as the number one problem facing Woodstock. A close second was protection of the environment. They wanted us to continue and maintain that. And I won't deny that I was concerned because those can be viewed as 2 conflicting charges. And, I believed that we could do both, but I was concerned that it would be difficult. And I think the Housing Oversight Committee, and Laura's been part of that, has just done a tremendous job at balancing both. And I really, truly believe, I'm confident that passing this law will help do both, achieve both, protect our environment. One of the main things it talks about clustering. Instead of spreading out a subdivision over 100 acres, you spread the housing out over 10 and you leave the other 90 unchanged. And I think, there are upsides to that because a developer comes in, over 100 acres, you could build 20 houses. Now they're going to build 20 houses on 10 acres. Their footprint is smaller. Their roads, their infrastructure is smaller, so that they're doing it more cost efficiently. There's also ways to create additional housing. I've always said there are a number of big homes in Woodstock where there's a couple, and giving them the ability to add a rental unit or 2 brings them income, brings them company, somebody else on the property, and it doesn't impact the community because you've got a 4 or 5 bedroom house already that could be making impact. Now you're filling it with a couple of families instead of 1.
Is there anything that addresses the long term, and is RUPCO anywhere in that?
Not in current projects yet. I mean, they were certainly behind the Woodstock Commons. RUPCO, besides the Housing Oversight Task Force, which focuses on the zoning law, Woodstock also has a housing committee, which is looking at different housing options. You know, addressing the zoning law changes is important, but there are also different options. And I believe the housing committee does engage RUPCO from time to time in terms of different solutions. What Woodstock Commons certainly was RUPCO, and there are other things the housing committee is proposing for affordable housing. And I'm not a member of the housing committee, but it's my belief that they're no stranger to talking with RUPCO about where RUPCO can be a help. I don't have any specific answers about plans where RUPCO is going to get involved right now, but I do know the housing committee reaches out. And
So one of the things the housing committee has looked at, one of the charges is to look at town properties and see what's buildable. And they did come back to me recently, maybe a month or so ago, with a list. I think the town's got 30, 35 properties, but they narrowed it down to 7 different properties, and they said, we would like the town engineer to take a look and give us a short synopsis on the feasibility of housing on each one of these. There's a 30-acre parcel over on Xena Road, close to Stewart's, which actually, when the first month I was in office as supervisor, I looked at that property and drew a little development in there of 40 affordable houses. So that's one of the properties we're looking at. There's another 28 acres down by the sewer treatment plant.
which is town water and sewer, which would be handy for that reason.
Correct. And that has possibilities. So we wouldn't go out to RUPCO. What we would do, and my hope is in the next 6 months to see this come to fruition, we would narrow down and pick 1 or 2 of these properties and then put out a request for qualifications. And basically what that would be is out to developers, and I know everybody gets nervous about developers, but developers, there's a lot of different, RUPCO is a developer. They're a developer of affordable housing. Family of Woodstock has gotten into the development business.
They have.
The Woodstock Housing Alliance, I know that that's a goal that they hope to achieve one day. So what we would do is we would whittle down and say, okay, these 2 properties are where we want to start. And we would say, okay, we have 6 acres or 20 acres or whatever we have. Tell us what you can do. And it would be a request, and then each group would come back and hopefully
With the bids and things.
Yeah.
I use RUPCO as a title because RUPCO is familiar. And I saw them work. And then you see what they did.
Yeah, the Commons is great.
It's still years later.
Yes.
And also we see everything that RUPCO has done.
Say that again, Thurman. Years later.
Yes.
Still beautiful.
Yes.
You know, I drive through there at least every other month. I'm so proud because we had to fight hard to get that there. It's a beautiful community. I drive through there, I see kids riding around on bicycles and having a great time. I see families out in the nicer weather anyway. It's a wonderful community, and I know that I'm confident we can duplicate that.
Yeah, RUPCO is a familiar word,
Yeah.
and they're all over Ulster County, so that's where that comes to. But you know, I remember I wrote a blog post about the Commons when the little babies began to be born, because that's when you get a community, when the baby comes, you know, and when people die and when people are born, then you've got this community, and it's still there and it's still beautiful.
The wonderful thing too with RUPCO is, so they've got I think it's 20 senior houses, then they've got family houses, and with 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom. So it's a truly mixed community, and I don't think we could ask for better.
And you know, aging is an interesting thing because you have the young.
We're all doing it.
Oh, yeah. You have the young seniors, you know, and then kind of like the middle seniors. A caregiver or a nurse in the senior section because suddenly they looked around and that's what their residents needed.
Good,
And I
yeah.
saw them do that in a couple of 3 different locations.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, and I'm not saying that Rucco is unique, it's just something that this community knows. When they came in, I went to the meeting, and as you said, this town was not. And those people sat there calmly, and it was obvious that they were going to do everything they had to do to succeed. And they did. Nobody drew the line and said, well, I'll do that, but I won't do this. They did it. I mean, that's
You know, I remember
a work ethic.
I remember the first meeting they came to, and Billy Van Cleek, who I love dearly, and he was the chairman of the Republican committee, and I remember him standing up, and I'm thinking, oh, he's probably gonna just trash this all, and he slammed his big fist on the table, and he said, this is exactly what we need. And I thought, wow. And you know, I give Billy a lot of credit. He really opened my eyes and made me pay even more attention, because I thought, okay, if, you know, so many different people are getting behind this is something important. And, you know, I was new and young at the time, but when they did a mural of a Woodstock town meeting, and it had a lot of Woodstockers in there. And when they were going to paint the mural, they had us all come in and get our photographs taken. And Billy had passed away. And I said, Kevin, it's really important to me that Billy be part of this, because you may not have had me as such a strong supporter had it not been for him. He said, get me a picture of him. And his wife, Jackie, produced a picture, and Billy got painted into it. So.
Well, those are the things that are so important that you two bring to this job. And that's the history. New people, I know this because I was there. I got recruited into the Woodstock Democratic Committee, which was a mistake from the word go, because of the food pantry, the conflicts there. But there was just so much that I did not know. And you know.
We've been working it.
Yeah. That is an
We've been
important
working it.
thing.
And different aspects. You know,
Yeah.
Bill works some aspects, I work some aspects. Bill is always supportive of the aspects where I'm working. But yes, we're definitely both working.
You bring different talents.
You know, it's interesting because we need both. We need new
Yeah.
young blood. We need newcomers to be part of the community, and we need the old timers too.
Well, you have
can't-
to bring the
Yes.
new people in.
Yeah.
You know, there was an
Because-
interesting thing. So a couple of months ago, there's a big to-do over a sign out on 212, almost to Phoenicia, and it was the Rainbow Lodge, and it was an old sports fishing hunting lodge, and they had this rainbow trout, and it said Rainbow Lodge on it, and it had been closed for 30 years. And I remember 20 years ago, I don't even think I was on the town board, I think it was on the zoning board, and somebody mentioned something about this sign, and it started to become an issue, and I met with Paul Schultz. I was the chairman of the ZBA, and Paul and I went back and forth, and you know, I remember saying, well, Paul, it's not advertising anything, there's no lodge there, it's really a piece of art. And he says, yeah, it's art. And we said, okay, it's art, so art's allowed, right? Yeah, okay. And that was it. And, you know, it was there for 20 years and nobody said anything. And new building inspector, new to town, doing a wonderful job, I'll say, but not, you know, knowing the history. And, you know, so he sends a violation to take the sign down. And, you know, there's this storm erupts, and I said, well, wait a second. We solved this one a long time ago. It's art. And, you know, I sat down with the building inspector, and we looked it all over and looked at the law, and, you know, we were able to work it out. But when that history gets lost, it can create conflicts.
Absolutely.
So it's so important to have both fresh new ideas and history.
Well, and that's why I'm excited that, and certainly supporting the NULA, because we'll have a great balance between the three of us. You know, Bill has probably twice the experience I have, because he's been on the board twice as long and his supervisor experience, and Anula is bringing the new ideas. And so I've been on the board long enough to be able to make things happen. And I believe I have made some things happen with the zoning revision committee. Telecommunications law got adopted. The water protection law got adopted. The scenic overlay law is now back with the board. So it had support from the board before. There were some public hearing comments. We've adjusted it to address those. It's back in front of the board. I believe it will get adopted because of the support it's already had with the board. So I feel like I've been in the position long enough to make things happen. I still have a to-do list that I'm still working, so I hope to go back and be able to continue the to-do list. But Anula, you've had her on your show, she has great ideas, she has thoughts, she has great perspective, her human rights focus, her, she's very concerned about different aspects that she's ready to jump in and work on. So I think that when you talk about the balance, I believe the ticket of the three of us has that balance of the new ideas and the experience.
Anula comes with invitation.
Yeah.
You know, didn't she come as a result of Hepner?
And myself. I mean, I reached out to her. We're excited to have her involved. You know, one of the things when I was listening to you both that comes to mind, and that I've said as new people have come on the board over time, I'm sure I've said it to you, it's important, it's necessary to bring fresh new ideas. But at the same time, it's really important to understand why we're doing what we're doing. I'm not a believer in, well, we've always done it that way. That's not good enough. But I do like to ask, okay, why have we been doing that way? And maybe we need to change it, but it's always important to understand, okay, this is why we do it, so how can we make that better? And I think that's how we grow as a community.
Yeah, and I've said before, and I'll say it again, I'm willing to work with anybody who really is putting Woodstock first. There are people, it's a short list, but there are people with a personal agenda, short list, but the majority of people, and we have wonderful boards, we have wonderful employees, we have wonderful volunteers on our boards, and I will certainly work with anybody. Whether or not I start out agreeing with them is not the most critical thing. What's important is if we're all putting Woodstock first and we want the best for Woodstock genuinely, we work things out. So that's what I found in the different committees that I've been part of, is people bring their ideas, and they bring it because they're passionate about Woodstock and making Woodstock the best it can be and doing what's right for the people of Woodstock. And I am happy to work with anybody who is working for the best for Woodstock and the people of Woodstock.
I've said it many times. I mean, Jeremy and I rarely started any conversation on any particular issue in the same spot. And, we were not necessarily miles apart. Sometimes we were on opposite ends. But I can't think of a single instance where he and I were not able to come up with a compromise.
What are some things that are on your agenda list? Everybody has, not everybody, but people have, to-do lists, things that I'd like to get done this year, things I'd like to get done next year. Gee, wouldn't it be nice if? What are some priorities?
You want to go first, or I go first?
Well, I've got some things I am working right now. The STR, there was an STR task force that put a report out, but STR is a zoning law, so it's now with the zoning revision committee. So it's pretty critical that we address STRs and what's right for Woodstock for STRs.
What is STR?
Oh, sorry,
for a new person?
Very good question, because probably a lot of people do know, but there are people I'm sure that don't know. Short-term rental is part of our housing crisis, is when people have accessory dwelling units, meaning they have a dwelling unit on their property besides the main residence. We want people to have that to be long-term rental. So if you have, and even people have, LLCs have bought up houses, and instead of somebody moving in there who's going to live here long-term, they just have a revolving door of short-term rentals, people that just come in for the weekend and then they leave. So that's the short-term rental. So long-term rental is what we want.
I have some questions about that, because that's what we have. We don't have any neighbors anymore. We have there's a new car all the time. And my question is, has anybody thought, what is the downside when the short-term rentals are suddenly too available?
Well, we have thought as a town board, and that's why the current short-term rental law was put in place, because it was recognized it was damaging to our community because we didn't have long-term people. And we talked about the Woodstock Elementary School being at risk of closure. Well, you didn't have families, because if you have people buying properties and it's a revolving door hotel and you have too many of them, you don't have the community that we all appreciate and need. So we're trying to find a balance. If somebody is a second home and they're not going to be in it anyway, well, if they can have short-term rental, then it brings people to the community and they make our center of town more vibrant, because the restaurants have people going out to dinner and we have people in the shops. So to me, balance is an important word for a lot of things, including the short-term rental, because we don't want to shut it down entirely, but we want to make sure we have long-term rentals, and that's part of what the new housing law, proposed housing law does. Is it saying, well, if you have an ADU, the first one can't be a short-term rental? That's part of the new housing law. So there are things that's put in there, but as a short-term rental, as a zoning revision committee, we want to look at it in general. So that's one thing on my list, but I don't want to.
If I could,
But I want to give Bill.
if I could just touch on what Laura was saying for a minute, back when we first started talking about regulating the STRs, we had pretty good estimates that we had as many as 600 or 700 people.
Illegal.
Well, they were all illegal because our law
Didn't allow them.
didn't allow them, period. But we all said, look, people are doing these. We're not going to put an end to it right now because they do have a value. And I believe it was Mike Hine, as county executive, and the county legislator years ago declared that tourism was going to be our big focus as far as an economic engine. And I think that's a good one. We have beautiful mountains and wonderful places to come and visit. But people need to stay somewhere. And, you can't have all the motels down in Kingston or Ulster. They've got to be spread out. We don't have a lot of motels. We've got a couple of smaller ones, so we needed rooms. And that met that requirement. But what Laura said is it's about a balance, and that's really true. So it's a balance between having enough rooms. We've put the cap at 300 now, so less than half what we were at the peak. And that may be still too many. I don't know. We're going to go through.
If you put the cap at 300, you used to have 600. What is anybody complaining?
Yes.
Some people are, and what I see more of is newer people will come into the community, buy a home, and then want to do an STR. So they're complaining a little. And I said, look, your real estate broker should have told you there was a cap. I hope they did, and you should have known coming in that it wasn't likely you were going to get that. So yes, there are a few people. But there are also a lot of people complaining they can't find a place to live. And so it's a balance. We need to have tourists to keep all the shops and the restaurants vibrant and making money and employing people. And then we need to have some place for those people who are employed in the shops and the restaurants to live, where they don't, have to drive all the way down to the other end of the county. So it's finding that.
Yeah, and the STRs,
that's crucial.
The STRs do drive some employment, because when somebody does have an STR, they're not always there hands-on themselves. And part of my door-to-door, I talked to somebody who said, well, she does cleaning for the STRs. And if it weren't for the STRs, she wouldn't be in the position she's in to be able to have the income she has.
Cleaners, landscapers, carpenters, doing work.
Yes, but cleaners, landscapers, whether you rent or not, the cleaning has to be done and the landscaping has to be done. But it is true. It does bring an industry.
It brings an industry. So I think balance is the answer, because we don't want a community all STRs, because we need our fire department. We need, Woodstock runs on volunteers. We have so many boards and committees and everything and the people are wonderful who serve on those. So, balance. I do think balance is the right word. And as a zoning revision committee, we've really just embarked on the STR topic. We started with the the zoning revision committee meets usually twice a month, but we're not meeting on Monday. It's a national holiday. But we meet on the second and the fourth Monday of the month. We meet at 6:30. We meet on Zoom, and the town calendar does have our Zoom. It has our meetings as well as our Zoom. If anybody, they are open meetings, And so we just, on our last meeting, we started deep diving into the STR. We're looking at what the STR committee, their report that they provided. We're looking at ideas that one of our members did provide. We want to look at the Hurley Law because the Hurley Law is said by the county to be one of the best laws for STRs. I think we were the first. You know, we were like right out of the gate.
We were the first.
And so we got something when there was nothing. But we said right when we adopted that law, well, we want to look a couple of years later, and we want to, in retrospect, how's it going, how's it doing, can we have a stronger law? So we as the Zoning Revision Committee will look at a number of things.
Actually, Laura, if I could just say
Sure.
too, we not only were the first, and I still think I believe this number is true, we have about a quarter of all the B&Bs, the STRs in the county are in Woodstock.
Right.
And so the county is making great tax off us, by the way. There's
Yes.
a pillow tax that now they all pay, and the county gets that. So
Yes.
they're anxious to see us not shut down altogether. But again, it's
it
all
going.
about balance.
Yes.
And you know, the county has been great at working with the housing task force to help us with our zoning law and really fine tune that.
So it's working.
It's a
lot is
work in
working.
progress, but yes, I
But
think
a
we're
lot-
headed in a good direction.
Well,
think
you
a lot-
know, if it's going to be successful, it's going to be a work in progress forever because it's dependent upon the economy.
Yeah, and the world changes every day. You know,
Right.
the world does change, so we need to change with it. We need to make sure that all, in fact, the zoning law, the whole kind of the revamp of the zoning law that's happening with the housing. Well, the zoning law is 30 years old.
Right.
The zoning law met. And the people that worked, and one of the people that worked on that law 30 years ago is on the Zoning Revision Committee. I have 100% respect for that person and the work that they did, because they gave us a zoning law that we needed 30 years ago. The world has shifted a little bit in 30 years, and so it is time to say, well, what do we need today? And that's what we're
two
doing.
of the big things. So I remember when I first got on the zoning board, and one of the mentors there, she talked about the zoning law being a living, breathing document. And it really is true.
Oh,
You've
yeah.
got to continually look at it. And, you know, if you go back and look, I mean, we amend it every year, sometimes twice a year, sometimes not for 2 years. But when they wrote it 30 years ago, there were no cell towers. You know, we beefed
Right.
up. Although, interestingly enough, I think the way they wrote the law, we had some strong protections anyway. But we wanted to address that and make sure that we had the strongest possible.
Mm-hmm.
There were no short-term rentals. The Airbnb didn't exist then, you know, so we had to amend for that. The wellhead protection is part of the zoning law now. And,
Yes.
you know, 30 years ago, water quality wasn't as big a concern in Woodstock. So, which incidentally, I hope that I can come back next week if you'll have me. I'd really like to spend a little time talking about the shady water and the dumping there and that issue.
Listen, if we've got, well, we're
We-
getting short now.
Well, I don't know.
Absolutely.
That's a long conversation, but, so,
Welcome.
okay,
Welcome.
fantastic. So for the viewers out there, next Friday night, we'll be talking about that.
You know what is so nice about having you guys in every week? You're not afraid. You know?
There's a lot of topics, but we're working on a lot of things and happy to explain it. We're happy to communicate to people about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and get people's input. Because I love having people's input. The answers get better when we get people's input.
And then after the election, if you guys could come back about
Sure.
once a month, because that way people can keep up,
Yeah.
you know, with because every month it's a whole new ballgame.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You never know what's coming down the pike. You know, one of the things that I don't think I've really talked about much anywhere here or on the campaign, but and something that I hope to see come to fruition is the noise issue in town. And I have a great task force made up of actually 2 members have now stepped down. One from, I hate to say sides, but let's call them the people who want quiet and the people who like the music venues. So I had 4 and 4. One from each side has stepped down, so I'm down to 3 and 3. But it's been a great experience, and you know, there's been a lot of compromise, and people have not shifted in their beliefs, but shifted in what they're willing to accept. And we're working on coming back to amend our noise ordinance, and I hope by the end of the year it'll probably be moving into January. We have something to offer the town board to look at.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
and where
Yeah.
all the different sides, get some compromise and are able to continue to live their lives and enjoy Woodstock. So
And people have very valid reasons for their beliefs. Because I know the people that have the music venues and the musicians, this is important, it's their livelihood. It's important. I love that Woodstock is so vibrant with the arts, including the music. It's wonderful, but I also understand the passion of the people that bought their house 40 years ago, and it was quiet, and they're in their seniors, and they need the quiet, and I understand both sides of it. So balance is we keep saying balance, but listening to everybody is so important, and getting people to listen to each other is so important. And I'm very heartened to hear Bill say that people are starting to compromise on it. But I understand the reasons for the different sides, and it's great to pull them together.
and it's not just two sides. I mean, it's multiple sides. From no music at all to music 24 hours a day, and everywhere in between there's a position, and
And it isn't only music.
Sure, there's a lot of.
and we do. So we're talking a lot about the music, but we do get back to the law is about other things too, and we have to be aware of that, and we do discuss that from time to time. So.
The helicopters. Oh,
Yeah.
back 15
Right.
years ago.
Sure,
Woo.
bad idea.
People had to take medicine for that.
Heliport is a bad idea in Woodstock.
That's for sure.
It's not well thought of.
Yeah.
The other thing that I don't have a huge update on, but I did appoint a task force to the primary goal, the number one goal, was to look at the youth center and come back with a proposal on either renovating it or replacing it. And I'm 35 years. I was a general contractor who specialized in additions and renovations. So I love saving old buildings, but my opinion here, and I said, look, you do what you feel you believe in, but I'm not afraid of a tear down here. In this case, I wouldn't fight that, because it's just a building that's not well suited.
And Richard Hepner has weighed in. He's our historian, as most
Yes.
people know, and he's weighed in and said it's not a historic building.
Right.
If it were a historic building, Richard did weigh in and said it's not historic. So really, it's whatever's best for the youth. Whatever's best, the building's intended to serve the youth, and let's just do it and serves the youth. And Patrick, Patrick was wonderful he's given me a couple of tours of the youth center, and it has a lot of great spaces, so we want to make sure that whatever replaces it or renovate, but that decision hasn't come, renovate, replace. But the spaces that they have are great, so let's continue with the great spaces for the kids, the youth that go there after school. And it is a vibrantly used building, but let's make it right for the youth.
So when I did appoint this task force, a lot of them asked, well, can we look at the whole property, the whole Andy Lee property? And I said, sure, have at it. I said, really, the only thing where I would draw a hard line is we just spent $2 million several years ago renovating this building, and I think we should honor that. Taxpayers spent money on that. But as far as everything else, come back with a scheme. Number one is youth center, but if you want to present it in as part of a bigger scheme. So I know that they're on a listening tour right now. They're talking to the different groups, including a lot of kids at the youth center and their parents. So
I think that's wonderful.
I'm excited. I think that either the end of November or early December, they hope to be able to come to the town board with a presentation. So stay tuned.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Nobody really has discussed that very much, and it's full of kids
Yeah,
all the time.
it is.
Yes,
Y-
yes.
I don't want to taint this, but I mean, kind of what I envision in my mind is maybe doing the youth center close to this building so that you can have cross utilization.
Yes, that would be lovely.
I wouldn't mind seeing some of the kids in here with proper guidance, doing television shows. I mean, I think that would be a
That would
great
be cool.
thing.
It would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
So anyway, fingers crossed we come up with some good ideas
That's
there.
exciting.
And it's
great.
nice, and the Cuomo renovation is coming along beautifully. You know, that was controversial. There was, as we all know,
It
there was
was?
a town. Yeah, there you go. There was a town vote for the Cuomo renovation. I'm so glad it passed because I've had some walkthroughs. It is wonderful. I think it looks wonderful on the outside. People were worried about, well, because the main Cuomo building is so historic, we didn't want to mess that up. I think Ellen's got her hands up for 5. So
Oh, we
all
have
know.
5 minutes.
Yeah, but the main building is so historic, we didn't want to mess that up at all. But I think the addition, it just fits so perfectly. It's kind of tucked behind. You don't see it when you come driving up the drive. And it is beautiful, and it'll be wonderful for not only the employees, but anybody that comes to visit those departments. You're all on one level. You don't have to worry
ADA
about stairs.
compliant.
ADA compliant. They're going to have the storage of files down in the basement. They're not above your head with having to have poles holding the floor up, holding the seal up, so that nothing upstairs comes
You know, I
down.
got to tell you,
So-
about 3 or 4 weeks ago, a member of the Civic Design Commission actually came in, and you know, listen, the Civic Design gave us a lot of great recommendations that we implemented in the plan. So they were very helpful. But she looked at it, she says, "It really looks good, though. I'm really happy."
And
to
I think
see
it does. If people drive up there, and people have commented to me when I've happened to be there in meetings, and we come out of the meeting, people say, "Oh, it looks great." And we preserve we preserve the beech tree. There's a beech tree on the one corner that has a big. It's a short fence, a little orange fence, short, but in a big space to preserve the roots so that nobody construction-wise will be driving over the roots and damaging the tree. The beech tree was preserved, and so I think it's coming along great, and the employees are looking forward to moving into it.
Listen, we're down to seconds now. Can you guys talk about when and where to vote?
Oh, so October 28th starts early voting. You would need to look on the Ulster County Board of Elections website to find out what the times are, the addresses of the sites. It's not in Woodstock. You can early vote in Saugerties, Shandaken, the Kingston Neighborhood Center, but go to the Board of Elections website to find out the times of each of those days. There's 9 days of early voting. Goes from a Saturday to a Sunday. It ends the Sunday before Election Day, which is November 7th. November 7th, you will vote at your normal election place. And you should have gotten a postcard from the Board of Elections reminding you where that is. If you voted before, it's probably pretty much the same place you voted in the primary and last year's election. So please, please, please vote. And I always like to take 30 seconds to say, please vote for Supervisor Bill McKenna,
Thank you.
myself, Anula Cordes. I continue to believe we announced our campaign in February, and I have been nonstop continuous in believing that the three of us, of the candidates you can pick, I believe will serve Woodstock the best. It's a critical election. Please vote for the three of us when you go on November 7th. Laura Ricci, right? Bill McKenna, Laura Ricci, and Anula Cordes.
Listen,
Please vote for
thank
the three
you
of us.
so much for coming, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. I look forward to seeing you every week through the elections,
Yeah, and beyond.
then I'm hoping to have you guys here like once a month.
Anytime.
You
Yeah.
know, it's an easy hour, and it's important because we have so many new people, and they don't know, and this is a really easy class
Yeah.
in civics.
And thank you, Thurman. Thank you, Ellen, because you have been wonderful in inviting us here and making us feel so welcome and comfortable. And a huge thank you
You know,
to
I
both
never.
of you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Dave. Good night.
Have a
Good
good
night.
weekend.
Good night,